Well, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We're starting a new series. It's on Galatians. Galatians is a wonderful little book. There's 6 chapters, and it's a really important book for us to get our heads around and for us to understand what the key truths of this book are. You know, the Galatian letter is sometimes described as the Magna Carta of Christian liberty. It is also been described as a rough sketch of the finished picture of the Roman letter. It does deal with mainly the same information that you have in Romans. So the two letters have a lot in common. They both emphasize salvation. They both emphasize the believer's freedom from the law. And they emphasize God's removal of any differences in status between Jew and Gentile. Now, there's a lot of that in the New Testament because that was a big issue in those days. Ephesians will teach us about Jew and Gentile being brought into one body. But it is this technical and legal language in Galatians, as in Romans, describing to us what it means to be saved, to be righteous, to be right with God. It's emphasizing salvation and our freedom, not tied in by a law, but the removal of the law and the fulfillment of the law in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. And it's highlighting the difference between Jew and Gentile. Galatians also has many similarities to 2 Corinthians, which we were tempted to go and study after finishing 1 Corinthians, because both of the letters stress Paul's apostleship. The reason for that is that Paul's apostleship was under attack, that people were actually undermining his authority, and so he has to deal with that. Now, Galatia, the boundaries of this region have changed from time to time. The people of ancient Gaul, which we would think of as France, but the people of ancient Gaul gave the area its name when they occupied the northwest of Asia Minor. And it was quite a wild place. And if you read some of the history of it, you'll find that there were some very strange practices and activities. And then the Romans gave them liberties and security and protection. And as a result, they brought them under a more civilized way of life. But, of course, the gospel is going to change them completely. So when Rome took over that area, they enlarged the territory, they moved the boundary further south. And now the Galatians as people, that they were known to be generous, they were quite inconsistent, they were impulsive, and they argued a lot. These national characteristics seem to be reflected in Paul's letter to them. He talks about the works of the flesh. And he goes into great detail about personal conflict. So there's a lot in there that would remind us of what the people were like. So it's good to have a look and see what the circumstances of the people of certain areas were like, and then you understand the letter that was written to them a little easier. The main themes of Galatians. Number 1, I've mentioned this already, Paul establishes his apostleship and his right to teach the truth of the gospel. So this is one of the main themes running through it. Number 2, Paul expresses his surprise at their deflection from believing the true gospel, turning to a false gospel. He's going to deal with that. One of the main themes of Galatians is Paul champions the cause of Christian liberty. So he champions this cause, that Christians are not free to sin, but submitting to the perfect law of liberty, to use another expression. Living for Christ, not living to keep to the law, but living liberated to live for the glory of God. Paul also clearly teaches the availability of the power of the Spirit of God in a believer's life. So we need to focus on that and look at that as we work our way through that availability of power. We're indwelt by the Spirit. We don't always harness the power like we should. And then Paul also tells his story in the context of these things, gives us some insight into his experiences with God. Now, there are a lot of really good outlines of the book. I'm not going to go through lots of them today, but some simple ones are like this: an introduction at the beginning, then chapters 1 and 2, an explanation, then chapters 3 and 4, an exposition of the gospel, chapters 5 through to chapter 6, verse 10, exhortation about this liberty, and then a conclusion in chapter 6, 11 to 18. I think that's JB or John Phillips' division of the book. I'm going to look at it like this. This is my outline. I'm not saying that I'm not sure if I got it from myself. I'm pretty sure I did, but I'm sure I picked up lots of this from other people. So chapter 1, the gospel and conversion. The gospel and conversion. Chapter 2, the gospel and its perversion. Chapter 3, the gospel and restrictions. Chapter 4, the gospel and freedom. The gospel and our lifestyle in chapter 5. And the gospel and its effect in chapter 6. Now there are other breakdowns, but there is a key verse, chapter 5 verse 1. Stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. That would be a key verse in the epistle. I'm looking forward to doing this with you. I hope you'll join with us. I trust it will be a blessing to you as these studies are to me, and I trust that God will speak to us, challenge us, change us and mould us to be more like his Son through the consideration of his precious word.